Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Magic Towers Resort. It has been a little while once again. Let me really quickly explain that. Basically, I am nearing graduation, and due to all the corona stuff, I wasn't quite sure yet when I would actually graduate, but that's been a lot clearer now, so I'm actually working towards that as well in the meantime. So that also means that my upload rate will be severely impacted, and it will be for the rest of time, basically, because my upload rate as it has been so far is only made possible because of corona and because of not actually having a whole lot of stuff to do. So please keep that in mind, that my upload rate will be decreased for the following time, basically. Anyways, enough talk about bad stuff. We're actually gonna continue working on the Glacier area, on the snowy area inside of Magic Towers Resort. I'm really excited to get started again, so let's jump right into the time lapse. Welcome back to Magic Towers Resort. So just a few days ago, I posted a post on the community tab, basically explaining the situation as it is right now, but also placed a poll in there as to what we would build next inside of the snow area. The result of the poll, though, is that we are gonna be building a River Rapids ride inside of this area in the very near future, in this episode, actually. But before we get into that, I just wanted to make a really small little food court here where you can get some drinks, probably some snacks of some sort. No actual sit-down opportunities, though, but just to kind of flesh out the area a bit more and bring some more structures into the area to really set the theme. Speaking of structures, though, one of the next things that we'll also have to work on is actually the station building for the roller coaster. Now, one thing that you might notice inside of this video is that the roller coaster is actually functional right now with the dual loading station. So just as I said in the last video, I did actually manage to get it to work, and you can actually download this plugin yourself right now to make dual loading station and all sorts of other things. I've seen so many people go and try out all sorts of different things, and people seem to find it really useful for the plugin that it is. It's called Advanced Track, so if you're looking for it, make sure to give it a shot. Right now you cannot share your save, basically save your save data that you did with your save track will only work on your own computer, so keep that in mind. It's still a bit limited until we actually have the new save file format, so keep that in mind. But that's how I was able to do the dual loading station. Now, I want to do a quick shout out, because if you don't want to use a plugin to actually make things like this work, I can really recommend checking out Brian's YouTube channel, and I'll post a link in the down in the description down below. He makes videos about Rollercoaster Tycoon 2 hacking, and he has some really advanced kind of things, like having a single queue for 2 tracks, basically, or having a ride with a dual loading station, basically, and he goes into great detail on how to make that work and then make it work properly, as well as reviews of parks. So he likes to open up parks that have been made in the past by one of our best members on the Rollercoaster Tycoon community, and he talks about them in a from a pretty professional standpoint. Brian does things in theme parks professionally as well, so he has a lot of very useful stuff to say about theme parks, so definitely check him out. His link will be in the description down below, and he was very nice to me to actually test out the Advanced Track plugin for me, and to give some feedback on it. However, we are currently building the station building for the mine train coaster that we got over here, and for this I drew a lot of inspiration once again from the Disney Sea. They have like this retro futurism port, basically, and I got some concept art that I found, and I kind of tried to mimic the same style because it's kind of the theme that I want to go for, kind of like steampunky kind of theme. So that is what I'm building right now. So the entrance building will be pretty large, will be a pretty prominent feature of the landscape, but hopefully with the coaster going around it and with some of the nature elements like rock work and trees and things like that, we can kind of make it fit into the environment properly, even though it is a pretty large building, which makes sense for a dual loading station. But it's always a challenge to actually make that to kind of hide that properly, hide the fact that it is such a large building. And we can do that by actually either focusing on how large it is or by hiding parts. And we're going to be doing both for this building, as you'll see in just a little bit. Now, so here I'm going for like a really large window, just to bring a lot of light into the area. I would imagine there would probably be some kind of prop that would be on display there. Kind of how Disneyland Paris inside of Discovery Land has Hyperion, and Hyperion Theater basically has like a giant steampunky airship that is right at the entrance of the theater. Which is really cool. It's probably one of my favorite theme park vistas that you can find. If you want to look it up, look up Discovery Land Hyperion, and you'll find the view that I'm talking about. So that's also kind of an inspiration for this station building that I'm building here, because it feels very grand and very steampunky, and I really like how it reflects the entire theme of the area. So I figured that would fit right in here as well. Now, the plugin that I wrote can be a little bit tricky to work with, so if you are struggling to make it work, make sure to check out the video that I posted, or at least the previous video that I posted, which is actually a tutorial on how to use Advanced Track, and I'm pretty certain all of you have probably already seen it. So that was already a bit of a spoiler alert that I got the dual loading station to actually work here in Magic Terrace as well. But it is really awesome to actually see it in action, and I'm sure that we will be able to use the plugin in the future more as well, because we can do a lot more with it than just making dual loading stations. Now here's why I talked about both focusing on how large this building actually is, as well as hiding parts of it. Now for the queue line, I am actually putting a small show building here behind the rockwork, just to kind of hide some of the aspects of this building, because I don't think it would look very nice if we actually continue this building on further. And this rock wall here with the snow and stuff like that is actually a really nice way of giving the area some borders again as well. Now for the log flume though, I had this idea of a glacier that would sit right on a mountain, and the river rapids actually going down that glacier as for the big drop. So for that vista point, for that sight line, I really wanted to extend it. I wanted to extend this river right here and make the glacier right at the end of it, so that if you're looking into this area and following the river, you actually see the glacier and the large mountain in the background, which I would imagine to be an extremely cool sightline, also for some photo ops and things like that. So that was basically the main inspiration, or how the idea for this river rapid started. So that's also the first thing that I'm gonna focus on. Now I want to make a video on how I go about building rides in the future, but in this case I really just had an idea for one specific aspect of the ride, so I focused on that first to get that the way I have it in mind, and after that we can actually work around that and build the rest of the ride. And this is something that happens with real rides as well, especially with things like dark rides. You might have a certain moment in mind, a certain scene or a certain effect that will help your story, and you can kind of build around that and start forming your dark ride with that in mind. And you may have to change that core idea a few times along the way, but at least it'll give you some kind of starting off point that can help guide you through the entire process. Now for this river rapids right here, we do have to eventually kind of move the coaster here a bit, so that's what I'm gonna start doing here, and just really quickly moving the block breaks. I'm probably gonna finish the layout a little bit later on, because I do want to incorporate it into the river rapids as well, just to bring some interaction. But of course right now we only have so much for the river rapids done, so I'll focus on that on a later in a later bit basically, and kind of add the coaster onto it at a later stage. However, it was a bit tricky to actually get the thing working again with the dual loading stations. You'll see me struggling with that a few times because I set something up wrong, the wrong way. I mean, so that didn't really work out too well. You'll see me struggling with that in a little bit. Before that, though, I just want to really make sure that we could actually make this glacier work inside of this environment as a whole. Because it can be really easy to focus on one specific scene like this glacier, but around that glacier we of course need mountains to kind of convey the idea that this is like a glacier coming down a mountain. So it's important that the surroundings work with that as well, especially since we have the coaster there with the block break. That was a pretty tricky aspect to actually work into this area, but in the end I think it works really well as another interaction between the river rapids and the roller coaster, because as the coaster is going up there, up the block break, you might have a river rapids vehicle going down the giant slide, basically. So I think that's a pretty cool little idea. Now, to really make the sideline work here, I did kind of move some of the support for the mine train up a bit, just so there's a bit more space to actually look through the area, just so you really can see the Glacier Mountain from the other side of the park, because I think that will be a very interesting thing to see. Now here I'm already kind of adding some really small details to the back there, just to get that cave entrance right. But another aspect that I really wanted to get in here is, of course, a bit of realism again. Now, what you will find on most river rapids, right, is that they have some kind of storage pond for all the vehicles. So when there are vehicles not in use, they can actually send them off to the small little lake and store them there for the rest of the day. I guess they do that every time at the end of the day, just to make sure that there's not too much pressure rubbing against the boats as they are, kind of pushing against each other. I think it might be something like that. I don't know the exact reason why they store them in there, because I do believe they store them there for most of the time, whenever they can, basically, and don't just leave the boats inside of the actual track. Actually, another point might actually be that when the ride is not in use, they usually just they probably don't maintain the water flow, because you won't want the pumps on if it's not necessary. So that might be another reason to actually move them to the storage pond. I'm not actually sure though. If someone knows, let me know in the comments, because that will be pretty interesting to know. Now, of course, in the typical river rapids, fashion, I did want a circular loading station. It's pretty typical on river rapids rides, or at least a continuous loading station is pretty typical on river rapids rides, and that usually happens on a round platform that actually rotates along with the vehicles moving along it. That way you just make sure that the spacing between the rapids basically can stay the same. You have a constant pace at which the vehicles are loaded. It's about as efficient as it gets if your station is actually constantly moving, because it also pressures the guests themselves to actually board the vehicles faster. However, it does come at the expense that sometimes something can go wrong, and then you might have to press the E-stop and stop the ride entirely, because someone screws up during boarding. But I think overall it's just the most efficient way to get a ride, because some of the rides with the highest capacity in the world, think of rides like Phantom Manor or Spaceship Earth, they are all rides with a continuous loading system, and they just keep being the most highest performance rides in the world. So that definitely has a factor in that. Now, behind this loading station, I did want to go into a show building. Now, you might not be very familiar with river rapids going into dark ride show buildings, but I personally really like that. I know several examples of river rapids that go into show buildings or are just dark rides in general, and I really like that idea usually. So I kind of try to make a mix of both. Now, in the end though, most of it is gonna happen indoors, But I think that's fine. Of course, we're really show focused in this park, so I think it's fitting that this River Rapids is a dark ride as well for the most part. I guess some people would classify it as a semi-dark ride, but really all the show scenes are gonna be indoors. So I would personally classify it as a dark ride, I think. Now there are placed a little thing that can take the vehicles out of the water, just for some maintenance and things like that. But before we continue with Magic Towers Resort, I have a really small commercial break. This is for a project that I made and I think you guys will really like this. So have a look. Over the past 5 years or so, I've been working on a website called Tuludo. Now, Tuludo is an online game creation platform. You can very easily create your own games. You don't need to know any programming. It just focuses on the fun parts about creating games. I'm a game developer myself, and I really like to teach people about what it is like to make your own games and how much fun it is. And with Tuludo, I hope to get as many people as possible into how games are actually made. So make sure to check it out, tuludo.com. I'm sure a lot of you guys will actually love it because it's very creative. It's very technical as well. If you want to, you can really dive into it very deeply. And I very recently made an update to it that adds ranks that you can earn as more people play your games. Because it's not only about creating games, it's also about sharing your games with the rest of the world. Check it out, tuludo.com, it's completely free, and you can find the link in the description down below. Alright, back to Magic Towers. So you can see that we just built the lift hill for the River Rapids. And this is just gonna bring you to the first height, basically. Just to make sure that we can have several drops throughout the show building that are not very high. And then after we've had all those really small drops, we go up the main lift hill and go down the main drop. And I think we can see this happen at a lot of different River Rapids, right? Where they generally either start at a higher point just to make sure that they, you know, can keep a little bit of speed throughout the entire thing. And then maybe they might have a giant drop at the end where they really, you know, go up much higher for the most exciting bit of the River Rapids. Anyway, so I was talking about Dark Ride River Rapids a little while ago, and one example is Mystery River in Movie Park Germany. Now, the entire River Rapids takes place in show scenes. Not all of them are indoor, but there are some very large indoor scenes. And I really like that. So that's what I wanted to go for here as well. But that does mean that we did have the show building wall there right next to the loading platform. But we'll try to dress that up in just a little bit. For now though, one of the main challenges is the timing on the River Rapids, because it can be really easy to accidentally have them really bunch up, which I would imagine to be a little bit unsafe, especially with a large drop. Now realistically, a large drop like this will probably be a block break section. Now in Rollercoaster Tycoon, of course, we cannot have only one portion be block braked. So this is the best that we can do for now, I think. There might be some hacky tricks that I can do with Advanced Track to actually make that work. But I really didn't want to go into that, so I figured I'd just let Rollercoaster Tycoon do the timing. So I just set a minimum time for the vehicles to dispatch eventually, to just make it work like that. Now, I don't really have a story for this River Rapids, to be honest. Usually I do have some sort of an idea of what is actually going to be going on. Not with this ride though. So if you have an idea for the story behind this ride, do let me know, because I have no clue. But it might actually be kind of nice to have some sort of story behind it. Right now I just play some random props that would fit the steampunky theme, and you know, kind of go from there. One thing that I did really have in mind while building this is another ride from Movie Park Germany, and that is Area 51. Area 51 is a splash boat ride, where after the loading station, you basically go into a giant volcano, which houses the show building, and there you discover some kind of alien civilization, and you just see what they are doing basically, and what their experiments are. There are some pretty creepy sections, or at least I wrote it as a kid when I was small, and some things definitely stayed with me that were pretty creepy, like humans in some sort of test tubes, just to spoil a little bit. But it's a pretty cool dark ride. It's already quite old, but it stands, it stood the test of time really well. And they recently refurbed it, so it's looking pretty fresh again. They painted the volcano again, so it's looking really good. And then, of course, right at the end, you get a giant drop out of the volcano again. It's a really neat dark ride, especially for a non-Disney dark ride. There are not a lot of good dark rides that are not made by Disney. A lot of them tend to, be made kind of cheaply. But Area 51 in Move Park, Germany is definitely a dark ride that's worth your time. It's really cool. I can really recommend it. But that theme of finding this ancient civilization is really something that kind of, was in the back of my mind while I was building this ride. So maybe it might be about something like that. Another idea that I was thinking about is actually the Dwellers in Skyrim. Of course, in Skyrim you have the ancient civilization, which kind of has some hints from steampunk. They use a lot of mechanical and steam kind of contraptions to protect their dungeons and things like that. And I would imagine this, the inside, or at least the show building of this ride to kind of show something like that. Or at least that was one of the ideas I had going into this. So I guess something like that might actually work for the ride. Now here you can see that I adjusted the layout for the roller coaster to make it go inside of the show building that we're gonna place around this final section of the river rapids right before going into the large drop. So I figured some kind of helix around the main show element of that show building would be pretty neat and just brings a little bit of interaction between the two rides, and also makes for a nice little surprise for the roller coaster. Because I would imagine that you wouldn't expect to see some kind of show scene right over here at the end. So that's just a little bit of a surprise that I think works pretty well. Now, at this point, it's just kind of closing off the show building, really. As I said before, I didn't really have too clear of an idea of what the story was going to be, so it's really just placing some random props inside of there. Kind of closing off the roof, making sure that I leave open what I want people to actually see. And filling in the props as I go, based on what is actually going to be visible in the end, because that's generally how I like to do my rides. Just make sure that the parts that are visible are actually themed, and the other parts don't really matter too much. I don't really care too much for that, so we can leave that as it is. Now here you can see me struggling with the ride, because at this point I realized that a lot of the vehicles kind of started to bunch up and the roller coaster really didn't work anymore. In the end, I found out that one of the sensors, one of the advanced track sensors, was placed in the wrong position, which is why some track kept switching right as the vehicle was going over it, and it kind of split up the train as if I was shoestringing. Yeah, that didn't really work out too well. So eventually, I found out what the issue was and actually fixed it, as you can see me do right now. Anyway, so in the meantime, I've seen a lot more parks actually reopen in the meantime, which is really nice. It's good that we can go to theme parks again, or at least I quite like that. You might have a different opinion about whether or not we can already do that in the current situation, of course. But if you have been to a park, do let me know, because I'm really curious how you guys' experiences are. I have very recently, of course, been to the Efteling, as I showed some footage of. That was during an employee preview, which was really, really nice. And after that, I also went to the employee preview of Max and Moritz, the new roller coaster at Efteling. It's a really fun, little cute ride. I really enjoyed it, and it was a lot faster than I thought for a powered coaster. Usually powered coasters are, of course, really targeted towards kids. But no, I really like Max and Moritz, especially with the music. And I do recommend Max, by the way, if you get to choose between the two. And in 9 days, actually, I am going to Disneyland Paris for 3 days, which I'm super excited for. I'm lucky enough to have gotten some reservations. Actually booked a hotel room with a friend, kind of hoping that it would open at the time based on the rumors that we heard. So we're gonna be there for the opening, which is exciting. Kind of weird though to be there at the opening. But you know, I'm just really happy to be back at the park again, kind of to check things out. I mean, I've been to Disneyland Paris enough to not worry too much about doing all the rides, so we can kind of take a chill and, you know, take our time to really enjoy it. And it's just nice as well to go out for a few days again, you know, because of course most of us have probably been stuck at home for a really long time now, so it's nice to actually go out and do things again. So yeah, do let me know what your plans are and if you are gonna visit any theme parks in the near future, because I'm really curious if any of you guys are gonna be going to theme parks as well. Or maybe some other things as well. Things like museums these days are really focusing on like experiences and things like that, which is why we kind of see this, you know, shift from museums going from boring places to actually places where you can experience things, much like you can do at theme parks. So that's a really interesting shift in the industry as a whole. So maybe you're gonna check something like that out. Do let me know. So for the final break run, I wanted some kind of building because most of this very last part of the roller coaster takes place kinda behind, backstage is what I meant to say. So I didn't really want to place too many trees to really hide that fact, so I figured that I would just build a building around the part that you would go through the slowest. Of course, the brake run, just to make sure that the guests wouldn't be able to look around and see all the backstage buildings that you can see there, because that would really break the immersion, and I didn't really like that. So just building a building around that will help. And just like that, it's really just coming down to placing some final props around the area. I still have one little issue, like it feels a little bit chaotic in this area right now. So I am gonna have to try and fix that. I think especially the part in front of the station building for the roller coaster does not blend as well yet. So I might have to tweak a few things with that. Maybe build some extra mountains there, just kind of hide a few things just to really make that work. Now though, I didn't quite like the rock wall that we had there for the show building, so I figured I'd just add something to kind of distract from the fact that it is just a really flat show building wall that's there, and I did so by just placing some rocks on top of it and a little building that might act as the control building for the ride, though I have another one on the other side. I think that would be a more fitting control building for the River Rapids ride. But whatever works, really. we don't really have to worry about that too much. With the snow area being mostly finished though, it might be time to start thinking about the next area. So if you have any ideas for the next area, do let me know in the comments down below. And if you have any feedback just in general, do let me know as well. Now, so far I don't really have an idea for the next area, nor for the area after that, but we might actually focus on a hotel in the next episode, just kind of keep some variation inside of this series, because of course we want to build some hotels around the theme park as well, and I also really want to build a water park outside of the theme park, so maybe we can work on that as well. We'll see though. Anyways though, we're almost at the end of the video. If you like this video, do make sure to like it. It helps other people discover these videos as well. Also make sure to share it with your friends if they like Rollercoaster Tycoon or theme park stuff, because I'm sure they'll appreciate this video as well if they check it out. That way, again, more people can discover these videos, and that really helps me out. As long as we can keep this channel growing, I'll be able to continue, even if it's at a slightly lower upload rate. Anyway, so that's about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye bye!